To start the recording for me. Well, welcome to Prepared, Not Panicked, Farm Readiness for Power Outages with Jesse Brownlee. I'm really excited to have Jesse here. Jesse's a Southern Oregon Land Steward who's been through the Land Stewards program. She's a farmer and a natural resource manager with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. She works at the intersection of resource management, agriculture, community resilience, and emergency preparedness. With hands-on experience planning for power outages, smoke, and rural infrastructure challenges. Jesse brings a practical real-world strategies for every budget and skill set. And we're really happy to have her here. I think, I love it when people come through the Land Stewards program and then just take that knowledge forward. They learn more and then come back and teach us. So this is a great scenario. I want to welcome Jesse. I'm going to go ahead and stop my share here so that she can get her presentation loaded up. Welcome.
Right. You guys seeing that?
Looking
Awesome.
good.
Okay. Well, honestly, let me get things a little sorted out here. They all moved around, of course. I would love, I am at home and I am in a rural area, so my bandwidth is not that great and it's snowing right now. So, but I would love if everybody wanted to come on camera for just a little bit. And I kind of just want to see the folks on here. I know this is kind of a farm centric, but does everybody actually have a farm? Do you actually have livestock? Do you have a well? I kind of want to see who has what, because if we don't have anybody on here with livestock, I can kind of gloss over some things if you want me to, or kind of just wanting to gauge what folks are coming at.
And you can use the chat too if you want to put any information about your situation.
Yeah. I would love to make it actually something that works for you guys. I do have a couple of hands out. Yes, all of those things. Yay. Awesome. I do have a couple of handouts and obviously not there to hand them out. So I do have them in our, I do have them in our Google Drive. I have a QR code that will show you how to get there. And if you're not a QR code person, then I can get them to you through Eugene after this. But I do have a couple of things that I think would really help work through this. Before we get started, I'll just show you the first one. Okay, work at a community garden. Awesome. Okay. All right. I'm going to just slide this over real quick, and then I'm going to put it back. So this worksheet, like I said, I'll have a QR code just a few slides in. But this is the sheet that I developed as I was kind of working through my process, because I did not find a sheet that would help me. And I'm definitely a checklist kind of person. So if you are as well, this kind of follows along with the presentation. And so, some people like to take notes, some people don't. But this captures the action items. The presentation talks about like ways to think about things, but these sheets are kind of the action items to go through and really help you figure out. My goal is to have an actionable plan when you left this class, which might be a little challenging doing it exclusively over Zoom, but hopefully, hopefully this will help. And so if you want to work along on this, you can. If not, we just do it afterwards. But I do want to say chance favors the prepared mind. That's one of my favorites. So, so anyway, that is a resource for folks. Now, we will get into it. Oh, horses. Yes. Oh, I see. Awesome. Okay. Well, very cool, you guys. As far as the questions, feel free. If you have questions, just ask. I might not see a hand, but feel free, Eugene, to stop me. I'm not one that people have to wait to the end. Like, let's answer your question if it's there, so you're not always wondering. And other than that, this is just pretty informal. I hope it can be tailored to something that is helpful. So we'll get to it. All right. As I said, my name is Jesse Brownlee. Yep. I was land steward class of 2023, I think. I am with Half Wild Farm all the way out in Prospect, Oregon, and definitely here to talk about outages. These are little too few and little too often and a little too painful these days. And since I think most everybody on here is on a farm or a rural property, that doesn't just mean, lights go off for us. It can mean all sorts of things. It means for me, my water goes out. I'm on an electric well, stressed livestock, spoiled food, fence problems, a whole lot of avoidable chaos. And so tonight is about reducing that chaos. My goal is to help you figure out what matters most on your place, what your critical weak points are, and how to make outages feel a whole lot more manageable. Because once the power goes out, once we start listing what actually depends on electricity, we can realize pretty quickly that it's a cascade effect when the power goes out. So especially if you rely on a well, outages are not just an inconvenience. They can last days. They can last a week or more. I think the longest one I've ever been in was 12 days after a hurricane in Georgia pretty recently. And in a rural area, help may not get there pretty quick, right? They tend to focus the utility crews in town a little sooner than out in the rural areas. So our water systems can fail. Our humans and animals, can suffer from heat or cold. Food storage becomes an issue. And what started as a power problem can pretty quick turn into a welfare and safety problem pretty fast. So what we're doing here tonight is not just preparing for darkness. It is for the cascade of impacts that occur when our power goes out. Quick roadmap on how this is going to flow. We'll start with why outages turn into emergencies, how small failures around can cascade into much bigger problems, especially in rural settings. We'll take a step back to think about how to think about outages. This is where we'll cover tiered priorities, critical time windows, and what it really means to plan for failure, not just normal conditions. And once we have that framework, we'll walk through several common critical systems on rural properties for small farms, water containment and safety, temperature, and food. I might wax poetic on food. That is one of my favorite topics because those are the things that when they fail, stuff goes sideways pretty fast. Then we'll get into power and backup systems, how to think about them, how to size them, how to use them, what types are actually out there. And then we will bring it all together with some execution, what to do before an outage, how to manage resources during an outage, and how to build a plan that is actually going to work for you. So we're moving from kind of understanding to thinking to systems to solutions to hopefully action. And I already mentioned the handout, so let me know. I do personal resilience classes in Prospect, and this is my first time doing this one, so I would love some feedback on if it was helpful, how it could be more so, because we have outages a lot in Prospect, and I definitely want to help folks out. So again, goal today, reduce that domino effect before the outage turns into an actual emergency. It is not about buying the fanciest gear, though there's definitely plenty of gear. And I do have some. It'll be show and tell won't be so exciting virtually, but I do have some things if you're interested. And so, thinking about, again, what fails first, what matters the most, because that's different for everybody. And then what you can realistically do with the resources that you have. So we will start with identifying the critical systems, spot the biggest seasonal risks because it can be different from summer and winter, and then choose the backup strategies that fit your situation, and then hopefully have a plan. So not perfection, looking for fewer surprises, fewer headaches, less stress for everybody involved. And before we do get rolling, it may be helpful to understand the lens through which I developed this presentation. Not everyone here is coming at it with the same skills, resourcing, interests, et cetera. So the info presented here is pretty heavily colored by my own situation and experiences. So a little context may be useful. I definitely am in a higher elevation spot. I have an off-farm full-time job. I have a very highly diversified farm with, shall we say, aging infrastructure. I bought a solid fixer-upper, and I'm totally dependent on an electric well, which gets pretty stressful in the summer for the animals. So when I bought this place, I have no background in farming whatsoever. And those basic power outage strategies that you can find, at FEMA websites and Pacific Corps and all the utilities companies, they didn't really scratch the surface for the issues that I ran into when I started acquiring livestock and things like that. So the things I am sharing are a little beyond the basics. This is stuff that I didn't find online. I had to learn kind of through trial and error, lots of trials. And so all that said, your situation may be different. What matters to you may be different. And the goal is that there's not one right answer. It's to help you think through the best answers for your place, your situation, your needs, things like that. So for you, think about what goes wrong fast in an outage. Often the exact problems shift from season, but the pattern's pretty much the same. Once the power goes out, there's a few systems that get pretty urgent pretty quick. Some issues like water supply, food safety, generator safety, and electric fencing can be a problem any time of year, definitely. As I say, if you had the worksheet, check it out. But just take a moment to consider, if you got little notepad and take notes on the side here, what failures tend to hit first at your place? What are your biggest headaches? Definitely. Headaches are definitely a sign that needs to be, whatever it's causing, that needs to be addressed. And how are outages different between summer versus winter or other, situations on your farm? Now, you're thinking about systems and how they fail. This design for failure is one of the biggest mindset shifts I think is helpful for people to make. When you are looking at a system, either planning one from scratch or repairing one, plan for failure, not for normal operation. Murphy's Law applies beautifully to power outages. The power will fail, and often backup systems will fail too. So the goal is not to create a perfect system, it's to make sure your systems are able to degrade safely instead of catastrophically. So what does that look like? I'll give you one example of a system that I had to rework because I originally established it for full power, basically. And over time, it just didn't work out very well. So I have horses, sheep, and goats as my large livestock. I have them out in one part of my field, and they all have troughs kind of in different areas. And some of those troughs are not right up against spigots. And I had learned real quick that I really hate hauling water. It is really nice to have a trough right next to a spigot, right? So you can just turn it on and fill it. When I started acquiring the smaller livestock, so quail and rabbits, I have them in a different area on my property. And for those areas, I actually have access to spigots right there. And I designed my watering systems for those smaller animals to run directly off the spigot. And you may have seen this, actually saw it on a YouTube video. It's super slick, super cheap, worked really well. Basically run a bunch of pipes around the edge of their enclosures and run little water emitters for them to drink out of along the pipes. And those basically were always on. Fresh water coming out of the well, moving into that. And it worked really well until the power would go out, because that watering system required on the pressurized well, obviously the pressurized water from my well. And so as soon as the power went out, that entire beautiful system quit working. And it was pretty stressful, especially for some of the smaller animals that were in the individual cages. Having to water them individually was very challenging. Took a lot of time. So I considered ripping it out and starting over, and then taking a step back. What I realized was if I just added a reservoir where the well comes in, added a reservoir, which started out being a 5-gallon bucket, and then had that 5-gallon bucket pumped to that system, what would happen is the well would fill up the bucket. Obviously, if you put a float valve on that, it'll keep it all the way full. And then when the power goes out, I had 5 gallons in that reservoir, which would last me a week for those animals. And so that simple shift of adding the reservoir first and keeping the reservoir full instead of just pumping right out of the well was a huge shift. It made that system work in a way that it did not work for an outage. Now, that was a redesign. When I designed my second rabbit area, call it the rabbitat. My rabbits are in a colony, so they're not in individual cages and things like that. The way I designed that water system was super simple, fully designed for failure. I took a 5-gallon bucket just by itself, directly off the well with a float valve and then put the emitters right around it. And that thing, I can fill it by hand. I can fill it with the well. I can fill it other ways. That system is designed to work with no power. And it performs beautifully. It does not require the well to be functional. And these are things that I didn't think of when I was originally designing this, how can I make this run when it literally has to just run by itself? So that sort of set shift, the water systems that default to gravity fill instead of total loss, the gates that default closed so your animals stay contained. Had a neighbor for a while. She had a very fancy electric security gate, and when her power would go out, the gate would open so she wouldn't get trapped in, but all her animals got out. So that is not ideal, obviously, in a kind of a livestock situation. So making sure those things, again, degrade safely instead of catastrophically. The other part of that is human reality. Outages happen when we're tired, we're stressed, it's cold, we might be overheated, we might be breathing smoke, maybe working in the dark. So your plan has to work under those conditions too. That means designing a simpler chore flow. Not only does it help you every day as you're getting through stuff, staging your tools and supplies where you use them, having written checklists so that you can use when your brain is not firing on all cylinders. This has helped me a lot. Your plan has to work when you're at your best. So design it, or when you're not at your best, excuse me. And so design it too. Excuse me. When you're managing power outages and you have limited resources, one of the fastest ways to get overwhelmed is to treat every power load like it matters equally, because it doesn't. One of the more helpful things that I did ahead of time was sort my needs into tiers. I just call them tiers: tier A, tier B, tier C, just as a way to help me prioritize, because not everything was an emergency right away. So for me, tier A is those are my life support systems. Those are the things that I will have immediate problems if they fail. That's my well, my gates, my electric fencing, and the automatic doors in my animal areas. Those things, if they fail, will cause me problems pretty quick. So tier B is operational support. This is stuff that is super helpful, but is not an immediate life safety situation. So for me, that's going to be lighting, certain tools that I use frequently. Refrigeration is a big one. Refrigerators and freezers, I got enough of those for sure. Those are things that I definitely want to have running, but is not immediately critical. And then for me, tier C is convenience. That's everything else. So once you have and you can call it, whatever else you want to call it, priority 1, priority 2, whatever. But the idea is to lump your needs into these kind of buckets, and then build your systems around those. So if you are coming at this with limited resources, maybe all of your tier A items, that's what you focus on powering first. If you have the ability to, go whole hog on one of those whole home or whole property generators, that's a little bit of a different story, but a lot of us don't have that. So plan your priorities so that they can be powered by themselves when they need to be. And honestly, if you can work it so that the convenient way is that they're always running that way, it's so much less stress. But sometimes we don't have that luxury. So powering it so it can be powered by itself if it's backed up on the same circuit, things like that. And one thing that is very helpful, label your breakers. A lot of people have them labeled on the inside. This house that I purchased did not have that. And so that was kind of a surprise as we were sorting those things out. Label your outlets and cords, and even just like simple color coding on that electrical tape. Colored electrical tape now. It can save you time and prevent additional headaches in the dark. So next step is figuring out exactly what belongs in your tier A, because once you know your tiers, you can start designing your systems around those. So think about your own place, your animals, if you have them, your systems, your setup, what absolutely has to keep working right away. Probably got a few things. I actually have four things in my tier A. Sorry, I have a crazy animal outside. What helps you function but could wait a little bit, not an immediate emergency, and that would be your tier B. And what is just convenience? Keep in mind, you don't need a perfect system. You don't need it to do all the things. You just need a bridge, really. So for us, thankfully, at least for now, Outages, even though they might be long, they tend to end, which is good. So your job is just to bridge that gap, right? Starting with the worst gaps first, if necessary. So don't ever think it, just start getting things down on paper. Definitely refine it later. But this is where your plan will start becoming yours. Now, before you start buying anything, buying equipment, building your systems, you need to get clear on how long that system needs to run. Is it just a couple of hours? Is it overnight? Is it a full day, full 24 hours? Is it several days? That time window, whatever that is, before things start coming, real problems, that's your critical window. That window determines everything. It determines how much water you need stored, how much fuel, what size battery bank, just how robust your backup systems need to be. And in this case, I'm not just talking about backup electrical systems. I'm talking about all the systems that you have. Like for me, I have individual water systems. I have individual feed systems. I'm kind of referring to systems on a larger scale here, beyond just backup power. But your system size should match your critical window, not your fears. Sometimes that critical window of time is not the worst case scenario. Frequently it's not, thankfully. And so you can save a lot of money by sizing to your critical window versus the worst case scenario. This, for me, was a key point of scale for sure. When you don't have the resources to buy that whole home or whole property generator system, start with a few small basics and then scale up. For example, when I first bought my property, I plunked my savings down on down payment. I didn't have the means for the system everybody said I needed if I was going to get animals. Kind of freaked me out. After an outage or two, I realized that if I could get through the first night into daylight the next day, I could work with that. There were still plenty of issues that I had to navigate, but being able to get through that one night at a time really was my tipping point to success. It wasn't necessarily the best strategy. In general, I could get through, if I could get through the night, I could take off work the next day if I needed to manage whatever was urgent in the daylight. And then over time, I was able to scale up so I could go full 24 hours and then several days. And it's pretty great because most outages are relatively short. So pick your time frame, go from there. For example, now I work 4/10s, and so I plan my systems for my entire work week. So like if there's a power outage Sunday night, Monday morning, some point like that, I can literally get through an entire 4-day work week and then handle whatever emergencies need to be dealt with when I have the time on the weekend. And not only does that help immensely with power outages, because most of my outages are not that long, it also means I get to go on vacation. There's not a lot of farmers that get to do that. And I have a lot of livestock, and it's really nice to be able to have those systems in place and that they work. They work without electricity. They work with very little supervision. And it's a pretty cool place to be. So just imagine what your systems would need to look like, what size they would need to be, how long they would need to be running in order for you to be in that spot, whatever that spot looks like for you. And don't be discouraged if your skill levels or your cash levels require you to start small. Mine did. It actually was a blessing because I learned what worked and what didn't. And some of those fancier systems, honestly, that didn't work super well. So the low-tech options are what I've found to work the best, actually, surprisingly. So I'm going to run through my Tier A system so you get an idea of how to think through yours. Some of these may be the same for you. They may not be. But definitely, be working through yours. I said I am on a well, and I know it looks like several of you are. So for me, my first crisis certainly was water related. That was always my biggest thing, especially in the summertime. And we have more and more of those summertime outages here. So water is absolutely my number one priority, a Tier A system. Everything depends on it. So if you're also in that situation, think through your full water chain. I had zero experience with wells when I moved out here, and I had a crash course. My property was put together by a solid do-it-yourselfer who I think put it through do-it-yourself school, trying to figure out the systems that he was building here. And it's a little bit challenging. Most of mine failed. So I learned. So work through yours before you have to do that. So learn about your well pump, what size it is, your pressure tank, how much piping you have. Actually, that's a kind of a hidden thing that most people don't think about. So your well pump, your pressure tank, your pipes, your stock tanks, troughs, things like that. Obviously in winter, there's a freezing issue. In summer, we have a huge demand issue here. And this is where I think redundancy really does matter. You don't want a single point of failure. You'll hear me say that over and over again. Store water in multiple ways and in multiple locations, whether that's your pressurized system when your well is working, gravity-fed options, portable containers, even frozen water. It definitely buys you time. It becomes usable later. And store it where you're going to use it, because I don't know, hauling water sucks, to be perfectly honest. Not a fan, especially if you're doing it by hand. So for me, the goal was every livestock zone should have at least one way to access water that does not require power. And for me, that's all the time. I want it to have at least one that's running off a no power option all the time. If I'm doing with convenience, that's a different thing. But that way, if one hose freezes, one valve breaks, one tank tips, you still have options. I have 7 different locations on this property where I have distinct animal units. And it's kind of nice because something's usually breaking in one. I got the others back up. So, ask yourself, how long can I provide water without power? What is my backup plan? Do I have a backup to the backup? My backup to the backup is I have 2 seasonal creeks, not on my property, but within a mile of my property. And if I absolutely have to, if all else fails, I can grab a couple 5-gallon buckets and go get some water for the horses out of that. I've never had to, but it's a good feeling to know that I can. So think through that whole system and your backup to the backup for most of these. Now, when the power goes out, obviously the water doesn't disappear, right? It just stops being pushed. That's what your pump is doing. It's pushing the water. You are transitioning from a powered system to a gravity system, which can definitely cause challenges when your water is still in the ground and you need it up out of the ground. So your pressure tank is your hidden storage tank, so that many people forget about that. How big is your pressure tank? How long does it hold pressure? Do you have slow leaks? How much water can you get out of your pressure tank? And that is often different than how much it holds, especially for me. So my house is at a higher elevation than my well and pressure tank. So when the power's out, I will run out of water in my house first, actually before anywhere else on the property. Now my whole property is plumbed in now because of all the failures. And I have a lowest spigot on my property that is 1,800 feet past my well. And so when my power goes out, I'll run out of water in the house, but I have 1,800 feet of 1-inch water line between my well and that lowest spigot. Now there's water in there, so it's stored more or less. But if I turn on a valve in the house and then run to the end of the property and I can get that water out of that system. So that is another storage that you may have access to as well. So think about where your lowest spigot is, how much water you can get from it. And you're not getting more water, you're just getting access to what's left in your system. Now, if you are on city water, do not tune this out. I don't know if anybody here is on city water, but that system is very similar. Those folks are still on a very, very similar system. It's just further downstream. Instead of, your pump, it's their pump. Instead of a pressure tank it's a big storage tank or tower. And instead of just, your household using it, it's hundreds, maybe thousands of other people. So it's a very similar system. It's just shared. So it can feel infinite until it's not. And a key difference is, we don't obviously control when that system has problems. So whether it is a power outage or a pump failure or a broken water main or high demand during a fire event, any of those can disrupt our water supplies. And just keep that in mind. A lot of folks on city water don't think about that. When the power goes out, obviously you're no longer on a normal water system. You are on a water budget. At that point, every gallon matters. What you have stored, what is already in the system, what you can access without power, that's what becomes your real supply. So that means using your water intentionally, switching to backup systems early before you waste your easiest access. What that means, like for me, I have a huge pressure tank. I have crazy pressure. Again, didn't put it in, but I know as soon as I know that there's a power outage, I need to bleed that system off so I can get access to that water. Because if I wait until my pressure tank slowly loses pressure, that water's all still in my system, but I cannot access it. So act early before you lose that easy access. And if your well depends on a generator, then your generator fuel becomes part of your water supply, right? Forget about that. No fuel means no pumping. So you cannot plan your water storage or you cannot plan your water use without planning your fuel if you are going to depend on a fuel generator. Your fuel tank is effectively part of your water storage strategy, and your water system is only as durable as the fuel behind it. Now, low water backup options. I started aiming for some pretty fancy systems when I first moved here, but this is where perfectionists should probably take note. I have seen time and time again ugly backup systems beat perfect systems that need power. I have some really awesome neighbors that are in a really, really nice house, and they have a generator system that probably cost more than my Tacoma when it rolled off the lot brand new. That thing is real fancy, and it kicks on instantly when the power goes out, and it runs that entire property. And it does it well until it runs out of fuel and they can't get more. That's happened twice. And they've ended up at my house asking for water from me out of my repurposed 55-gallon drum. And so the goal is not elegance, it's water access. And so for household use, that can be something as simple as filled mason jars. That's what I started with. You got to store them if you got them. And so you might as well store them with water in them. One of the tips I learned from my grandma when I started getting into canning was if you have a short canner load, doesn't matter if it's pressure canning or water bath canning. If you got a space for a can or a couple of jars in there, fill them with clean water, seal them, run that canner load, and when you're done, you have sealed, shelf-stable, safe, potable water stored for almost no extra effort. You're already going to run that canner load, so that has helped me a lot. I also keep a Gatorade cooler, repurposed, like the big Gatorade coolers that I have staged. And so when I have a power outage at my house, I am bleeding off that pressure tank. Before I lose that pressure, I'm filling up that Gatorade container right there. That has been super helpful. If you have animals, that could be transitioning to a manual well pump or a sand point well. I'm finding sand point wells to be super interesting. If you have sandy soil, not rocky soil, obviously, in a high water table, they are kind of promising. That's one I'm going to branch out into this year. It's something I've definitely been looking at. Storage tanks, obviously, used or freebies work pretty well. Rainwater systems, you can even enhance puddles, which I have done in my chicken yard to great effect. All that good stuff. One of the things that I am doing this year is just got a rainwater system put in, and turns out, not super surprised, but I can, excuse me, sorry about that. I will be looking at Craigslist and Marketplace for used above ground pools, because you can get those for free sometimes. I see a couple times a year, and I'll be using that to some of my overflow. Super not pretty, but my ducks will love it, and I'm super excited about using that dirty duck water for irrigation in summer outages, or fire protection if it's needed. So that is another thing I'll be moving to this year. I strongly encourage people to store both liquid and frozen water if you have the freezer space. Obviously, the liquid gives you immediate access. The frozen will buy thermal mass, usable water later. And so it's definitely about building the layers, not relying on just one ideal setup. This is what a layered water plan for human use can look like. Obviously start with what's easiest. That's your stored water. That's the easy stuff, the jars, the beverage coolers, the potable water tanks and bladders, all that good stuff. That phase is pretty fast, goes easy, is predictable, but when that runs out, definitely have a transition plan. Transition to sources that are still available but require a little more effort. So that means running your generator to pump while you have fuel. If your fuel runs out, shifting to rainwater if you got it, surface water, or manual well pump. Obviously, those might need treated, but have a plan there to kind of transition over time. For livestock use, the order is obviously a little bit different, but the principle is still the same. So start with what is in your troughs and waters, transition to non-potable options, or at least, safe for animals. not necessarily for humans, because that'll preserve, obviously, your potable water for human use, which is definitely a huge asset in extended outages. Again, the goal is not to rely on one solution, it's to move from convenience to effort over time. Water is, again, usually the first system that people think about for good reason, but I have definitely learned in an outage that is not always the biggest problem. Because for me, if my containment fails, things can go sideways pretty fast. If you have livestock, electric fencing may be a big one. If you're lucky enough to have really nice intact fences, I envy you. But I shifted to electric fence just because I have a big enough property that I wasn't able to sort that out. And everybody said, hey, your animals will get trained to the electric fence and they will respect it eventually, even when it's off. In my experience, that is not something I would count on. I have a female livestock guard dog who regularly tests the fence by pushing her brother into it first. And if he yelps and runs off, they know it's live. If he doesn't, then they end up plowing right through that in seconds. The fence goes down, the dogs are out, the sheep are out, the turkeys are out. If the horses are in that pasture, they're pretty quickly out too. And I have come home to half my animals out on Butte Falls Highway in the dark at the start of a winter storm during an outage that started when I was at work. So that's a completely different level of problem. That one gets dangerous fast, obviously for the animals, for humans. So it's definitely not just an inconvenience for me. It is a safety problem. Again, your needs may be different. Excuse me. Now, in our world of glorious climate control, a power outage can pretty easily change our environments. It affects temperature and airflow on a broad scale. In summer, that definitely means heat stress, poor ventilation, worse air quality. I do not have an air conditioner, so that is definitely something that we struggle with in the summer around here in smoke situations. In winter, that can mean cold stress, freezing issues, stale, damp, moldy air, in closed spaces, kind of gross. So it's not just about comfort. When the power goes out, you can lose airflow, circulation, and temperature control all at the same time. And it can become both human and animal welfare issues pretty quick. Now, in an outage, trying to actively heat or cool an entire space is incredibly inefficient. Obviously, my wood burning heat folks here, if anybody's here with a wood stove, I am definitely enjoying one currently. But we have a leg up on the winter heat source that is not electricity dependent, but not everyone has a wood stove. Now, there's all sorts of tips online about how to better retain heat or retain cool in a space, so I won't rehash those here. But unfortunately, as a farmer, fortunately, we don't necessarily get the luxury of being able to hole up inside to stay cool or stay warm. So I've had to figure out how to manage my own temperatures while working outside, summer and winter. Definitely in the summer, that means, knowing where your air is moving. Shade, evaporative cooling. Evaporative cooling works super well on this side of the country. I am from Georgia. It does not work well at all when the humidity is 100%. But it definitely works great here. I would say there's all sorts of cooling clothing options you can buy. I have a few of them. Or you can just go to Goodwill. This is what I've done also. Go to Goodwill, pick up a white cotton loose shirt. And it's kind of interesting. In Georgia, they say cotton is king, because it is. And those hot, you can dampen it, and I use it to keep cool. But the things that make it great in the summertime also make it really challenging in the wintertime, which was a hard lesson to learn for me. I had never heard the term cotton kills until I moved out here. So also, one of the things that I do particularly enjoy when it's super hot and smoky, just having a simple dollar store spray bottle of water. And if you have a little bit of peppermint essential oil and just kind of spraying that, that not only has the cooling effect of the water, it's the cooling effect of the peppermint, the nice smell of the peppermint. Now, it's not obviously running off the smoke, but it is a nice mental break. A welcome pick-me-up when you're trying to manage your temperatures in those types of conditions. So in winter, definitely the opposite. You're trying to keep close. Warm fluids, hot water bottles, safe heat sources, all that good stuff. One trick I've learned when I used to walk to school every day was to hard boil a few eggs before I was heading out. And then I would tuck the eggs in my pockets. They fit nice in your hands, and hold those hot eggs in my hands all the way to school, and just eat them when I was ready. And so that trick translates beautifully to working outside. I'm outside most of the time for work, and it doesn't have to be eggs either. It could be rocks. We have basalt rocks around here, which are heat safe. Definitely know your rocks, because some of them are not heat safe. And if you're using them near a fire or something that is very acute heat source, there could be explosion issues. So just be aware of that. But in parts of the deep South, folks still keep rocks by the fireplace and keep them warm, and then tuck them into bed at night. Tuck them into cold shoes, wet shoes. They can also help dry shoes a little bit if they're small enough to let the airflow in there. So that is super helpful. But the key idea here is to, heat the people, not the house. You're not trying to recreate normal. You're trying to stay safe. You're trying to stay functional. And so when we aren't able to climate control the whole space, just control what matters. Focus on that. Now, without power, obviously, you're not going to clean the air. That's just a reality, but you can significantly reduce your exposure. So the goal becomes, when it's smoky outside, reduce what comes in, create a cleaner space, and protect your lungs. So first, reduce infiltration, stop as much outside air coming in as possible. Old farmhouses are notoriously leaky, windows and all that good stuff. So just being aware of where your leaks are, trying to block those, obviously, and then create a cleaner micro zone. So a bedroom is ideal. Pick a small room, seal it aggressively. And then third, use moisture. This has actually been an interesting one for me. So even simple things like hanging damp towels or sheets near areas with natural air movement, like doorways, hallways where people walk past, can help capture those particles and reduce what stays airborne. So how I kind of figured this out, it makes sense, but when it's super smoky outside, normally I line dry my clothes. And when it's super smoky outside, I don't like to do that outside. It's like they're just marinating. So I bring my stuff inside, and I noticed it was always cooler in the rooms where I was drying those things off. And so, it was kind of in hindsight, but I share it just because it was an aha moment for me. So there's three things going on. Not only am I drying my clothes, but that evaporative cooling of that moisture evaporating off does kind of cool the environment around it. And then the damp fabric also traps smoke particles. So kind of cool. This effect can be increased if you've got access to like a fan with a solar battery, or a battery powered fan, something like that. Or if you have like a sheet or a towel that you want to dampen in very slightly soapy water, not super sudsy, and hang those. You might be surprised at the effect that it will have on kind of your temperature and your smoke situation in a sealed room. It actually is kind of refreshing. So just a little note on that. Now, as far as reducing your exposure, there's all sorts of ways online, you can do that. So Dashbell, check those out. But one thing I have learned the hard way, is if you opt for a fueled generator, if you have one, beware of how close it is to your house. If you have an interlock for your generator, which you definitely should, it's probably on your main breaker. It may not be. For most folks, it'll go on the main breaker, which is often pretty close to the house, which is pretty convenient. But the exhaust and the noise, especially if it's a big one, can really exacerbate an already challenging situation. Last year, I purchased a 50-foot pigtail that allowed me to move my generator from right next to my house to about, obviously, 50 feet away. So it is actually now on my carport, place where I park my car. It is a concrete area. It's covered, it's shaded, and it is far enough away from the house that it actually gets better airflow, and the generator itself doesn't heat up as much. So it's a little more efficient. There's not exhaust coming into my house anymore, and the noise is so much less. I can park it on the other side of my truck and prop up a piece of plywood, just a standard piece of plywood, and the noise bounces off of that and kind of goes towards the woods behind the house. And it really does make a difference. So any of those little things that you guys can do, obviously outages are already stressful. Heat and smoke makes it worse. Reducing that noise, reducing that exhaust in the house can be very helpful. For your animals, focus on reducing stress. Shade, water, and just stillness help them a lot in a smoky situation. If it makes sense for your animal areas, you may consider slightly dampening the floors. Obviously, you're not looking for mud. You don't want, super wet animals. But if you have kind of a mister on your, like a spigot or something like that, or if you had the ability to even take a watering can out there and you can slightly dampen the floors, that'll really help keep the dust particulates down. It helps cool the soil a little bit. I have my livestock dogs really love it when I do that. And so that can help your animals out a little bit as well. So, well, as I say, this is a whole lot, and this is one of those topics that's pretty easy to get overwhelmed. So I had added in a break. I guess I hadn't thought about Eugene since we are now Zoom instead of in person. I'm assuming you guys want to take a break, yeah? Or no? How do you want to do that?
No need for a break, but unless you need one, I think we'll just keep going. There are a couple of comments. Let's see. Lindsay she says, I thought rainwater collection is illegal in the state of Oregon. She had designed a system on a greenhouse, but then was told that you couldn't harvest the water. And
I definitely have thoughts on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it is illegal in some ways, and the way the state of Oregon looks at it is if once it touches the soil, the soil of the state of Oregon, it is waters of the state. So if you can capture that rainwater on a man-made structure like a roof, run it into man-made gutters, into man-made pipes, into a man-made tank, and as long as you keep it in there, you're good. And I will even say my rainwater system was funded by the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District stormwater grant. So if you guys don't know about that, I would highly, highly recommend it because not only is it not illegal, Lindsay, somebody else will pay for it. So that's a very good resource, Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District stormwater program. And I am literally getting my system checked off on Friday. So it's good to go. It's getting inspected by the county. So that's how legal it is.
That's my understanding too, is that if you catch it off of a man-made impervious surface, it's legal as long as you're not catching waters of the state that's, somewhere once the waters hit your ground. So it's worth looking into that. OWRD, you can get information from Oregon Water Resources Department if you want to drill in a little bit more and figure out what's legal on the rainwater harvesting side. But a great way to have an extra barrel of water, right, on the side if you can do it.
Absolutely. And I'm super surprised at how much water my shop roof will catch. So awesome. Well, we will just keep going then. Okay. Well, I guess we will build on this. So I scheduled the break before food. So as I mentioned, food is definitely my thing. I will say I might wax poetic on this topic. Hopefully it's not too much of a rabbit hole, but it is something that is always first and foremost in my head. And I know it is for a lot of people. So food and feed, how to manage it, how to protect it, how to keep things safe, because when the power goes out, the food systems we're used to often change right away. Refrigeration is the obvious one. Freezers and fridges start to warm up. If you have automatic feeders and any equipment that you rely on for milking or processing, that is also affected. So the shift here is from convenience to management. Most of those times, those powered systems we've leaned on are convenient. Obviously food loss is typically not an immediate crisis. You have a little bit of time, but it can go sideways all at once. I was, kind of proud. I've collected various refrigerators over the years from people that were moving and we're just giving them away. And I have 5 fridge freezer combos and 2 deep freezers, which is pretty awesome. Super flexible when you have a farm and you're doing butchering and things like that, until it's day 5 of a power outage in the sweltering heat. And I'm seeing liquid pooling under my freezer and it's full. And that is when panic mode starts. And that stress, more than anything, has helped me realize that freezing everything is not the best answer. Again, it is a single point of failure. So if you get nothing else out of this whole presentation, consider that. Ruthlessly identify your single points of failure, whatever they are, and diversify. So that's the main reason I got into pressure canning, meats in particular. We'll get to that in a minute, but definitely identify and diversify. So food prep without power is not just learning how to cook. It's about how to do it safely, how to clean up afterwards. First, know your cooking options. Know which appliances are actually safe indoors. Most camp cooking items are not. Assume anything not designed for indoor use belongs outside. In winter, especially, a fireplace or a wood stove can be a huge asset if you know how to use it for cooking. It does not have to be an actual wood cook stove either. And it doesn't have to be inside either. You can, at least in Prospect, we can often find those non-certified wood stove used for very cheap. And if you have a suitable outdoor space where you can safely set it up, it's worth a consideration. Absolutely. I personally am a fan, again, of all things food related, including cooking. And I have developed 2 outdoor cooking spaces over the years, one directly in response to consistent power outages. And so one is an open fire cooking space, which is super simple, just literally a rock fire ring like I would make out in the woods. And one space is essentially a fully equipped outdoor kitchen, fully covered outdoor kitchen. It has propane appliances that I've pieced together from scrap over the years. I realize that not everybody has the time, space, money, or even inclination for 2 outdoor cooking spaces, but I definitely bootstrapped mine. It's not fancy, but it is awesome in the summer when I don't want to cook outside, and really awesome when the power goes out, both of them, honestly. So if anybody wants more details on that, we can talk later. That's a rabbit hole for me. But think through your cleanup also, okay? Especially if your water is limited. One thing that I found super, super helpful is to set up a 4-stage wash system. I think I told you guys I have a checklist of things that I do when the power goes out. One of the first things I do in the house is fill up that Gatorade container next to the sink. And I buy the sour cream in the 3-pound containers because I go through a lot of sour cream. And I have 4 of those containers that I fit in the sink. So they're only about this big, little sour cream containers, and I fill those up 4 with water. 2 of them get soap, 2 of them do not get soap. And so what that is essentially a 4-stage wash system for clean water, dirty soapy water, and rinse water. And just those containers, which is not a whole lot of water at all, I can use for several days for washing hands, washing dishes, washing pretty much everything. And it works super well with very little water. Obviously, keeping towels ready. You'll go through a lot more towels when you can't just wash your hands all the time. Not everything has to be washed. Sometimes a quick wipe down will suffice. Usually not a fan of sanitizers, but when you do have limited water, they can be helpful. Alcohol-based for your hands, food-safe sprays or wipes for items that come in contact with food can give you an extra layer of mental space from I can't really wash this as well as I want to. The big point here is that cooking is only half the plan. So you got to think about your cleanup, your sanitation, and your safe fuel use just as much. So the next question, this will bring me to my second handout, which I'll show you guys here in a second, is what are you actually going to eat during a power outage? This is a big one for me. I'm going to keep this high level. This is a very deep topic I actually have an entire class on this one, but I definitely want to give you a system that works. Early on, my plan was canned soups. They're easy. I like them. They taste good. They're shelf stable, reliable, portable, easy to heat and eat, right? What's not to love? Well, the first time I had a several days long outage in the summer, I realized pretty quick that the last thing I wanted to do was tuck into a steaming bowl of hot soup. Definitely not interested. So that forced some creativity because most of the stuff I love in the summertime definitely requires refrigeration. So chicken salad, tuna salad, all those good mayonnaise-based salads, cool salad greens with meat and creamy dressing, all that good stuff definitely does not work well without refrigeration. So here's what I do. In the wintertime, I have taken up pressure canning, and when I'm butchering, I can my meats in ready-to-eat portions that are pre-seasoned. For example, I like my chicken salad, and I can do rabbit salad as well. They're kind of interchangeable for me, but I like it in certain flavors. I'll run several loads of boneless rabbit, chicken just for that. You can also pressure can seasoned taco meat, fajita meat, gyro meat, actually, which is really good. You can even do breakfast sausages. Seasoned beans, you get the idea. I have some really great books, particularly on pressure canning meat. I was going to bring them tonight. I do have them. I can show them to you if you're interested. All this information came out of books, but the pressure canning of the meat is super helpful. And if you are not a canner, not something you're going to get interested in, there's all sorts of options. Like even Walmart will have all sorts of canned meat options, from ham to roast beef, and obviously the tunas and chickens and things like that. So you can get your proteins covered. I also will similarly batch grains, particularly breads or muffins, tortillas, seasoned and cooked rice and quinoa. I don't do gluten super well, so I do those, and I cook those and freeze those in portions. And also, if you're not much of a cook on that, you can find pre-cooked, pre-seasoned, portioned, shelf-stable grains in most stores, if that's more your speed. So then I am packaging and freezing various, accoutrements like butter, cheeses, Thai curry paste, berries, other fruits, cooked onion, bell pepper blends, all that good stuff. All of that is staged in one freezer in one spot. So meat, the grains, all the little fancy additions, right? All of that is staged, clearly labeled in one freezer, in one spot, in one grocery bag, next to a couple of frozen jugs of water. Then I collect or buy, you can buy these, but typically I just get them in small amounts, like when I go to Subway or something like that. Those condiment packs of mayonnaise or other, non-shelf stable condiments that you can get into packs. And I have those staged as well. So during fire season, it's a little differently in the wintertime, but I have staged in one spot in my fridge portions of sour cream, yogurts, hard-boiled eggs, sturdy veggies like head lettuce, cabbage, celery, carrots, etc. Those things that don't really need a lot of refrigeration. And as soon as the power goes out, I snatch open the fridge, get those things staged out, snatch open the freezer, pull out that first batch of food and then a couple of jugs, and then I shut those. I put those items in a cooler. I don't even need ice because I got those jugs, the frozen food, and then I put the fridge food on the side of it. And that will last me 4 days in my cooler. And I don't have to open the fridge. I don't have to open the freezer. And if we're in a week-long outage, then on day 3 or 4, depending if it's winter or summer, I can open that freezer back up and get round 2. That'll get me through an entire week without having to cook anything. And I'll show you. And this is all, again, this is good, healthy, nourishing, cooling foods. This is a, Mountain House, Slim Jims and Cheese Whiz and that sort of stuff. Let me show you real quick if it'll pull over. This is again in one of the handouts that I will show you guys. Kind of walks you through the way to think about this. Obviously, there's a couple of assumptions that I made when I was putting this together. So work through those. And then kind of the course system of how to do this. These are things that I don't do a lot of processed foods. So these are things that I will stage specifically when I know, like at my house, I get winter storms, January, February. I tend to get a lot of outages then. And then in summer, I have the red flag warnings from July, September, July basically through September. So I will always have these things ready around those times and kind of staged and ready to go so that when the power goes out, I'm literally sitting on go. And that system that I just told you about, where I've done a couple of things, early on that I have just pre-staged, I literally put that together with these ingredients. I'm going to scroll back up. These ingredients. This is a summer outage that I actually use. This is literally something that I work through. I have my little checklist. And when I'm using this plan, I can literally feed myself good home cooked food for an entire week with no cooking. It's nice, cool food. It's nice, nourishing. It's all good stuff. And wintertime, obviously, we want warmer things. We don't want cold stuff all the time. One of my first 3-day outages was in an all-electric house in an Airbnb where I was trapped in, and it was awful. Everything was cold, and I froze, literally. So it is very to me is very important in the winter to make sure you have warm foods. I do enjoy reheating things, but again, if you're on a fuel budget, these things, having them made ahead and just stashed so you can real quick pull them out, doing that cooking ahead of time, man, it's a huge benefit. So I will share all these. I would love to know if you think this is helpful, because it's one that I fall back on a lot. Anyway, take home when you're trying to conserve your fuel, manage your temperature, manage your water, manage your own personal stress, having food that you like that is already prepared, cooked, portioned, and staged, so that all I have to do is at most reheat it. It has been a true game changer for me. There we go. Now, leftovers. I am a leftovers kind of gal. I am a person that will cook 3 or 4 meals a week all in one day on Sundays, and I usually just eat leftovers all week. It works really well for me. But in the summertime, I absolutely do not do that. Certainly not during an outage. So that's a key shift for me. Managing leftovers without refrigeration is challenging. It honestly, it adds headaches, adds other stress, and it's something that can be avoided with planning. So I would strongly suggest that. One less headache. Winter in this area, especially where I'm at in Prospect, nighttime temperatures are pretty often cool enough to safely hold food for one night. You definitely want it to be below that 40 degrees. 40 to 140 is the danger zone on food. So in the wintertime for dinner, I will usually cook one extra meal, enough for one extra meal. That goes outside on the deck in a cold porch. I have a little thermometer out there. I have thermometers all over the place. We'll get to that in a minute. So I know what temperature it is, and I have it stashed in an area that critters can't get to it. So for me, the lesson is when it comes to power outages, handle leftovers by the season, not by habit. Sometimes it doesn't serve you well. So your freezer, obviously it's storage food, but it's also temperature control. A full freezer, most of you know this, holds cold much longer than an empty one. So I try to keep mine as full as possible. That can be actual food, extra bread, even, empty reused containers full of water. A full freezer is definitely a thermal battery. So I do, put my stuff together in there when possible. Then, like I said, I have those 2 main seasons, January, February, and late July through early September, where I know I can expect a lot of power outages. So during that time, I definitely make sure that I keep my freezer organized kind of for outages. Honestly, I got my most valuable, hardest to replace items in the center, where they stay coldest the longest, less critical items on top, around on the edges, things like that. Try to keep everything labeled, and definitely having that grab first meal bag, so that as soon as the power goes out, I'm not hunting all over, moving stuff out of the way, wasting all that cold. I can just open it, pull it out, shut it, and keep things safe in there. One thing that I do use year round is the coin in the cup trick. Helps see if your freezer has thawed and refrozen, which is super helpful during, like if you go away for vacation or something like that. So if you haven't seen this trick, take a little cup, like those little bathroom cups you can get, fill them partway up with water, put a little coin on top, and just put them. I put several in each of my freezers, one in the door, one in the middle, and one at the very bottom. And if your freezer thaws, you can tell how much it has thawed by how far down in that, if it refreezes, how far down that coin goes in that cup. Especially if you've gone away for a few days, you come back and you see that coin is frozen in the bottom of the cup, then something has gone on, even if the rest of your food looks fine, because it's already refrozen. So that has been super helpful for me. Now, food storage without power is, again, one of those topics that can be a total rabbit hole. So I'm going to keep this focused on what is most useful during an outage. That is a good book on the screen there. I could not find my copy, but it is one that has been super helpful for me. And it is definitely the reason why I have, 30 some odd thermometers sprinkled around my house and my yard, so I can kind of tell where those temperature gradation places are. Super helpful. One pretty fun thing for me was to learn what truly needs refrigeration and what can go without for a while. There are, again, rabbit hole alert on that one, but if you are interested in that, there's a ton of tips and tricks out there from RVers, overlanders. The sailing crowd has had that figured out for quite some time. So definitely scope that out. Some of them may make you go like, oh, not up for that, but some of them are actually super helpful. Again, pay close attention to those natural temperature zones. Most of us are like, oh, we got a cold room in the house or a hot room in the house, but you might be really surprised. You can just buy a really inexpensive pack of thermometers. You can buy them digital with the hygrometers. I have a bunch of those, or you can buy them the manual, like little lab thermometers. You might be surprised. There might be a place in your house where you could hold food. There's actually, it's kind of crazy. One of my spare bathrooms in this house that I'm in will stay below 40 degrees if I don't heat that room. It's as cold as my refrigerator is in the wintertime. It's very helpful to know those things. They can become useful storage areas depending on the season. The key is don't guess, though. Get those little thermometers. They're very inexpensive. Obviously, outdoors can become an extension of your storage space. If you have snowbanks, shaded north side of the building, you just have to secure things from your animals and don't lose your food in the snow. I have done that. Forgotten about it. And then the snow melted and I was like, oh yeah, that's where that went. But also your preservation methods matter too. Again, I was relying pretty heavily on freezers and refrigeration, but having everything in the freezer is another single point of failure. Diversify and thrive. Again, I do have a number of books on different ways to preserve foods that are very interesting. Some of them are very good, kind of old techniques, old Mediterranean techniques that I found very helpful. If you're interested in those, let me know and I will pull them out. But anyway, the takeaway from this slide is that food storage without power is not just about appliances. You don't have to manage your appliances. Humans have safely stored food for thousands of years without refrigeration. So it's about knowing your spaces, knowing your options, your temperatures, and definitely planning ahead. So far, we have talked a lot about systems, but outages also affect the people running those systems. They are stressful, right? They're stressful on you, your family, the whole community sometimes. I know when the power's out in here in Prospect, it can affect everybody. And that matters more than some people realize. So when stress goes up, human performance usually goes down. People get tired, frustrated, dehydrated, underfed, more prone to illness, injury, bad decisions for sure. So part of outage preparedness is protecting your own baseline. Eat real food. Don't eat junk. Man cannot survive off Slim Jims and Cheez Whiz alone. Be careful with your caffeine and your sugar, especially if your sleep is already disrupted. If you are a caffeine person, do not go without all of a sudden in an outage. That can be challenging for you and everybody around you. And where possible, build in some movement, fresh air, mindfulness, especially a lot of times we think, especially if you have kids in the summertime, oh, I'll just send them outside. What if the air quality is 400? We don't necessarily want to be out in that. So making sure you have thought through inclement weather, ways that you can, work through some of that in inclement weather, because it does help with your stress, your sleep, and your patience, honestly. Give yourself and others around you grace. These situations are hard. And finally, keep track of the things that irritated you, the things that slowed you down, or the things that failed entirely, because those pain points are telling you exactly what to fix before the next outage comes. Now, we are going to shift from identifying problems to thinking about solutions, because this is another place where people can go wrong. Feel the problem and immediately want to jump into buying a generator or some piece of equipment, right? And unfortunately, that can lead to overspending, sometimes in the wrong place, and not because you don't care, but because, kind of need to think through the systems and the needs first. Again, neighbors and everybody was like, oh, if you're going to run this place, this is a generator you need. Turns out it's not. And I saved several $1,000s by not listening to that. The goal is to match your power solutions to your actual needs, stay within your budget, and to build resilience over time. And think bigger than just backup power. You don't have to back up everything in its currently electrified state. If your house is all electric, are there key appliances you could shift to other fuels? For example, the house I'm in now, it was all electric, but the previous owner got tired of the power outages taking her means to cook out, and she put in a propane range, literally just because of the power outages. And it is amazing, right? Super helpful. So can you do something like that within your resource level? So think of this as your filter before you spend money. If you get this part right, everything else gets easier, because once you know exactly what you need to power, then we can size the system. So start by listing your critical equipment. What absolutely has to run? For you, it may be your fridge. For others, it may not be your fridge for a couple of days. Make sure you look at both your running watts and your starting or surge watts. Okay, they're not the same. Pumps and motors, obviously for fridges and things like that, often need much more power to start up than they do to keep running. So definitely make sure you're looking at that difference. And then think about runtime. How long do you actually need the system to run? Again, that goes back to your critical window. That's going to depend, what fuel or how much fuel you need or your battery capacity, and it's definitely not something to guess at. I would say go around to your appliances. That worksheet that I made will kind of help walk you through that. Go around, check those little tags on them, write it down, and match your system to your actual needs. Okay, once it's sized correctly, your next step is making sure that it is set up safely. Always use transfer or interlock equipment. Never backfeed a system without it. So I am not an electrically minded person, and I kind of want to walk you through those. You guys might know what these things are. I did not. So just in case you're like me and you did not know what that is, I didn't quite understand the concept of backfeeding the house. So the way the electrician explained it to me, my house gets power, like most folks, it comes off of my power line and into my house, and in theory, through my house to the rest of the property. So my house typically supplies power to the rest of my property. We, as residents, do not typically feed power into our homes, right? So when we are running a generator and we are putting power into our home or into our property to do things like that, that is where they're calling it backfeed. Now, if you do not have a way to isolate say you're running a generator to power your house, and normally you have power coming in off the power line. If you do not have a way to isolate your house from that power line, what you're doing is you're backfeeding into your house, which is then backfeeding into the power line. When our dear electricians and linemen are running around trying to restore power back to our house, that can kill them. Okay, do not backfeed a line. It is a very dangerous situation. That is, I know a lineman, and he said one of the scariest things that he hears is when he pulls up to a house to restore their power and he can hear a generator running, because he has no idea if they know what they're doing with it. So please do not kill the people that are trying to restore your power. Make sure you have proper transfer interlock equipment, and label, test everything clearly. Sorry, I didn't go into what an interlock was. I'm sorry. Just very quickly, the way it works is it's on your main breaker. And in order to plug in a generator, it's kind of like a switch. You have to orient your breakers a certain way in order to access the plug. So it basically locks out the plug that your generator would plug into until you have effectively closed those breakers that is preventing that backfeed. So until you have done that, you cannot plug in. That is what they call it, an interlock, and that those things save lives. They're not cheap. They should definitely be wired in by a professional. But again, don't kill your friendly neighborhood lineman who's trying to put power back to your house. Also, be intentional about what you plug in. A lot of times when the power is just flowing free, we don't think about it. All of the little timers and gadgets and things that we have plugged in, you may want to pull those out so they're not drawing phantom loads. Making sure that you have properly sized electrical cords. Just because you have an extension cord does not mean it is sufficient for the load that you're trying to run on it. And have a plan for your fuel storage and your rotation. These are a few hard rules. Never, ever run generators indoors or in enclosed spaces. Never take shortcuts with electrical safety. I can't say enough about that. Carbon monoxide, fire, and electrical hazards are real risks, and this is not the place to improvise. This could be life or death for somebody. Now, scheduling your power use. This is something, again, that I learned during 12 Days Without Power post hurricane. This is one way to save a lot of fuel over a long outage. And so basically, it's easy for us to think about when the power is always on, it's just always on, right? We don't ever think. We might turn a light off and are on, but the power is always on. When you are powering your house or your systems on a generator, don't think of it that way. Run your generator in scheduled windows, because when your power is always on, your generator is running, whether you're using it or not. So running your generators in windows can really help save a lot of wear and tear and heat and things like that. For example, and this is not the system I use. If you're interested in what I do use, I can run you through that. But just an example of, if you have a larger system, maybe running your generator in the morning to run your well, your water systems, bringing your freezers back up to temp, or your refrigeration, things like that. Midday, looking at tools, charging, anything productive that you're trying to do, and then evening, maybe turning on your water again, and then lighting while you're kind of using it in dark, and then shut it off. Most of the time, there's rarely a need to run a generator overnight. And if you're disciplined about this, it can dramatically extend your fuel supply. And if you have a smartphone like most of us do, you can actually set your recurring phone alarms that are labeled that will literally go off and remind you when to turn on your generator and turn it off, which can be super helpful. And that is how you can turn like a few days of fuel into a week or more. So once you understand how you're actually going to use the power, your backup power, now we can talk about what kind of generator makes sense. So there's definitely, several kinds of pretty common generators. And probably the one that most people think about is the portable fuel generators. These can be gas, probably the most common, propane, dual fuel, diesel generators. Dual fuel are awesome. They're especially useful. This is what I have. Propane has a huge advantage in storage compared to gasoline. But really, these fuel generators, they're pretty common. They're very easily serviceable. They have, again, a wide range of fuel types, sizes, and price points. But those trade-offs do matter, right? So fuel becomes part of your outage plan. As I said, if you run an electric well off a fuel generator, that fuel becomes part of your water plan. Gas does not store super well unless it's managed carefully, and refueling during bad conditions can be challenging. And these things are honestly loud. They're super loud. They require hands-on operation. Now, they are a very solid tool only if you're prepared to manage the fuel, the noise, the safety side, all that stuff that comes with it. Now, not all portable systems behave the same way. So looking at a very different category, which is one I got into last year, are portable solar generators. And I want to be clear, these are not the big ones that are attached to your house that cost, thousands and thousands of dollars. These are very small. I have 2 of them. I can show them if you're interested, but they are smaller than a carry-on. They're actually kind of, one of them, the smaller one, it looks like a little lunchbox, honestly, except for it's about 35 pounds. So these are a completely different experience from fuel generators. They're super quiet. They're simple. They are safe to use indoors. There's no fuel issues, no exhaust, no startup issues, which is super helpful in cold weather. You can literally just poke it and turn it on. Super simple. And they're excellent for lights. They're excellent for, keeping your phone charged, keeping your small systems, things with no or very small draw. But where people can run into trouble is expecting them to behave like a big fueled generator. They just won't do it. They can't run large loads. They typically are not good for your wells, your water heaters. Excuse me. And obviously with a solar system, recharge conditions depend heavily on access to sun, right? Like if it's smoky or foggy or, winter weather, all that can limit performance. They are a great supporting tool, very great, but probably not going to be ideal for like the backbone of a full farm outage system. That's definitely how I use mine. They're a huge help, so easy to use. And because I have my other systems sorted out for at least 4 days, I can get through most outages without having to run my big dual fuel smelly generator. So that is super helpful because sometimes when I'm out there trying to yard on that thing, I'm like, so I have my solar ones. There are also a couple of niche options worth mentioning if your property supports them. Wind and micro hydro. These can be incredibly powerful, but only in the right conditions. They are very, very site specific. Wind can work well during storms and winter, but obviously only if your site has consistent wind. Micro hydro is one of the few systems that can run continuously, but it requires continuous water flow to do that. And at least in this area, I believe it's pretty complex on permitting. I used to live in a place in Washington State where the Soil and Water Conservation District folks were actually helping my neighbors put these in for free. I don't think that's the case here, but it can be a decent option if your property would work for those. If yours is, it can be an excellent option. So I include them that you don't overlook them, but again, not for everybody. So we have talked about systems, power needs, generator considerations. But what makes all of this come together into successful execution is a little bit of prep ahead of time. So let's shift into what you can do before an outage hits to really get set up for success. Much of this you can do now, but some of it needs to happen kind of just before an outage where possible. And you would say, well, how do you know when outages are coming? We don't always know, obviously, right? But like I said, I have really narrowed it down to the 2 times a year when I am very likely to have an outage at any point. Yours might be different, but it might be similar if you live in the Rogue Valley, January, February for me, and July through September. But really, there are leading indicators during those times. If you check the weather, I check the weather at least once a day, sometimes twice a day. And if you start seeing those alerts for the next few days along the lines of, hey, winter storm warning, red flag warning, high wind warning, airport weather alert warning, that's your cue, right? For my place, anytime July through September, when I see thunderstorms forecast, especially if it's coupled with winds coming out of the south, regardless of whether there's a red flag warning or not, I will typically see shutoffs at that time. It just happens. So, you can also check out PacifiCorp has a public safety power shutoff map. You can just do an internet search for PacifiCorp PSPS, public safety power shutoff. It is an interactive map. You can enter your address and it pops up with, it kind of has different colors that will show you if they're like concerned and monitoring an area that they may take offline. They'll show areas that are offline. They'll show areas that they know they are taking offline for certain reasons. Obviously, we don't always get the warning. So that is helpful, but honestly, I don't check it super often because I've gotten pretty good at just looking at the weather conditions. It's pretty telling. Hopefully, again, not a perfect science, but hopefully it gives you some tools. So when you have reason to believe an outage is coming, fill your fuel tanks, including your vehicles. Don't forget about those. Obviously, make sure to charge anything rechargeable. I use a lot of rechargeable items. Those are the same things. If you remember that story I was telling you about where my piped water system failed until I put that storage at the front of it, those rechargeables work the same way, right? Very similar. That's your storage, that's your reservoir, that power in that item. So charge anything rechargeable, test your systems before you actually need them. Water is a big one. Obviously, it's a red flag and you need to water your plants. If you have them, fill your pressure tanks, containers, and freeze water when you can. When I say fill your pressure tank, the first time somebody said that to me, I'm like, wait a minute, where do I put the water in? Like, I'm just filling it. I didn't quite understand that in order to fill the pressure tank, I actually have to run the water. So what happens is when I turn the water on and the water starts to flow, my pressure tank will kick in and it will come up to a certain pressure and it will stay there. It'll go off when it reaches a certain pressure. And then over time, I'm sure I have slow leaks in my system. The pressure just fades, even if the water is not running. And so if you're down low in your pressure system, then you just open up a spigot and it should fill up your pressure tank again while you're filling up your water containers. Freeze water where you can. Obviously, not everybody has a freezer space, but if you can do that, it's a really good idea. And think seasonally. Summer and winter outages are different, usually different. So prep for the conditions you're actually going to be facing, especially if it's going to be smoke situation. Stage items where you need them. Do not make yourself hunt for key information or tools in the dark. The big idea is simple. Prep time buys you time, honestly, and it reduces stress when things go wrong. Now, once the outage starts, do not make the mistake of using everything all at once. I learned this the hard day, that 12-day outage. The power company, I think it was like day 5 of 12. We didn't know it was going to be 12, but on day 5, the power company started texting about every 12 hours that we expect to restore power to your location within 12 hours. And the power would come on for maybe 30 seconds, maybe an hour, and then it would go right back off. Okay. And it was awful. People did not pace themselves. Food spoiled, fuel ran out, stuff got real. And that was all because they expected that it was going to be back on. Now they were told, right? But it didn't materialize. So don't expect it, right? Plan for that outage after the outage. I know now at red flag events or bad weather, outages can stack. You get one outage. If you're lucky, you recover a little, and then another one hits right behind it. And the second outage is usually worse because your food is lower, your fuel is lower, your batteries are drained, like literally and figuratively. You and your systems are already stressed. So plan for that outage after the outage. Keep a reserve inside the reserve. Don't burn through everything on outage number 1, and always keep your backup items untouched for a true if all else fails situation. Have that if all else fails question answered before you need it. That mindset alone can stretch your resilience a lot. Now, to wrap up, I sprinkled these nuggets throughout, but I do really want to make sure they stick because for me, these were the hugest pain points in past outages, and I hope I can really shortcut some of that painful learning for you. Definitely, if you're a minimalist, I am not a minimalist, but take note, when it comes to emergency management, redundancy is often worth it. Okay, that was the first lesson I learned when I joined search and rescue years ago. They said never go into the woods without 2 ways to make fire, minimum. And the reason is if you have 2 ways to make fire in an emergency, you have 1. If you have 1 way to make fire, you have none, right? That applies to water supply, power supply, critical tools, just like it applies to making fire in a life or death situation in a wilderness. So, power outages definitely seem to be a force multiplier for Murphy's Law. If you need that one special tool to turn on a system and you're anything like me, that thing will not be where it is supposed to be when you need it and it's cold in the dark. For example, my well is a homemade job by the first owner, and unfortunately it requires a special kind of wrench to turn the water on and off. And that wrench is now literally wired to the pipe that I need to use it to turn on so that I cannot accidentally wander off with that thing. And it is always there when I need it. That has saved my bacon at least twice. Okay. Also, as I said, I'm not electrically inclined. So when I had my generator interlock kit installed, the electrician was walking me through the steps that I had to do to make it work. I actually wrote those steps literally on the breaker door in Sharpie. And that has absolutely saved my bacon as well. I had an outage about a year ago where I had a 14-year-old gal house sitting for me, and she had no idea what to do. And I was able to tell her, just go to the breaker and read it. And she's never done anything like that. And she was able to walk through it. And that was super awesome. The stress was just, it was very helpful. Do not assume your systems will work, even if they are actually working. In fact, it was me trying to get my generator to run my well for the first time that actually led to me uncovering a series of silent issues with my entire property's electrical system that was so dangerous. It took 5 contractors, 5 months, and about $9,000 to fix. This is not where you want to be in an outage. I figured this out because I was testing my systems to get ready for an outage. Okay, that would have been awful if I'd have been in that situation. Cannot stress this enough. Test and verify. Um, in fact, plan an outage day or even a long weekend if you can swing it, because some issues don't become apparent right away. When I say test your system, getting your generator like cranked up and running is really only part of the system, right? You got other things going. So I strongly suggest cutting power to your house, your barn, maybe your whole property for a decent period of time, so you can truly see what works and what doesn't, because learning from those pain points is often much less painful than the very same lessons learned in a real outage. It has also helped me enormously to write down the steps I need to take pre-outage to set up for success, and what I need to do in the first hour or so of an outage. This is literally, I think it's 27 less things that I have to think about, remember, figure out, whatever, when I'm cold, tired, wet, hungry, frustrated. And the great thing is when I check off number 27, I know that I am set. And that is an amazing peace of mind. Just awesome. And finally, I will say, well, as part of this exercise, we did kind of consciously pare down all the electrical powered fluff that we normally enjoy on a daily basis to only what matters in an emergency or semi-emergency situation. But creature comforts do have a place, and they can be a big difference in surviving an outage and thriving. For example, if you have family members that will literally die if there is no Wi-Fi, but powering your router is not on your priority list, have a plan to manage that boredom. And make sure, again, you have good options for inclement weather, because boredom can cause more friction than you might think. Definitely plan for that. If cowboy coffee is just not your thing, but all is right with the world, if you can start your day with that steaming cup of fancy Nescafe Ultra Whip Sweet Frothy Deliciousness from that fancy machine you got as a wedding gift, you should probably build those into your outage plan. That's going to make a big difference for you. Because honestly, there's not much better than sitting down to a great cup of coffee in the peaceful silence of a winter outage and watching the snowfall, when you know that you and your family and your animals are set and safe. Okay, it's pretty awesome. So I hope this class has helped get you a little closer to that reality. And again, hopefully those worksheets will be useful to you. I'll make sure everybody has those, and would love some feedback on if anything was missing from them, things that could be added, stuff like that. So this was where I was going to shift into some show and tell of some gadgets. But I could do that, but I don't know. What would you guys, any questions, comments?
I think we're close to time, but if anybody else has any questions they want to throw in the chat, I can propose those to Jesse now. I guess I have one for you, which is, you mentioned all those great rechargeable gadgets that help get us through everything from the power pack to the, LED lanterns and things like that. Do you have any strategies for keeping that stuff charged up, and on the ready?
Yes. So I have one of the super helpful things that I have done is in my house. Now, for those people that are interior decorators, this probably won't work, but I am not in my house. One of the things that I have done is stage pre-strung solar lights in my house. And they're outdoor lights. They're like the Edison bulbs that just hang down. And because they're in my house, obviously the little solar pack doesn't get sun all the time. I have one bedroom in my house that has an east-facing window, and it gets sun for a lot of the day until, obviously the sun moves around. And I have 4 or 5 of those little battery packs, those little solar things in that window that I just keep. I have a couple more in my truck that I just keep on the dash of my truck because I park in the sun every day. And so those are my go-tos that I always use. And then in the summertime, I have a honestly, it's just a ream of paper box that I keep some other rechargeables in that I just set out in the sun. It just sits there. Other than that, those are for the solar items. The non-solar items, honestly, I just use so often. I'm always keeping them charged. And example of that is my headlamps. I have 5 headlamps. They're all rechargeable. I will cycle through them. I use them. I walk my dogs every morning in the dark, and then obviously in the winter and the afternoon in the dark as well. And those things, I cycle through them. I keep them out. And I have a little lantern that I use all the time as well. And so just constant use on those things.
Yeah, I know, some of those lithium batteries don't like to be on chargers all the time. And so I ended up just like choosing a closet area and putting a timer so that the things that
Ah,
are plugged in get charged once a week for an hour and then it's off the
ah,
rest of the time. And that way, if the power goes out, I know where they are and I know they're charged. And that's given me some peace of mind.
that's a
Um,
good one. Yeah, I don't have anyone that I just keep on the charger. So that is a good idea. Awesome.
How about
Little
your
secret.
your electric fence? You mentioned, the trouble that you can run into when power goes out. Do you have your fence set up on grid power normally and you can power it with your generator, or do you go to a battery?
My main perimeter fence is so I have 5.2 acres in electric fence, and the main perimeter fence is on like what I would call shore power, basically my house normal power. And then I have 2, and this was not cheap, but I have purchased 2 solar, like standalone solar units. I went with Gallagher. You can get a lot cheaper ones, but the cheaper ones are cheap for a reason. That is, again, something I would not mess around with. Um, uh, and so I normally run my exterior fences off that main plug-in one. And if I'm in a situation where the power is down, I might run the exterior fence off of my most powerful Gallagher. And then I have certain animals that I keep separate, whether it's my does when they're in the rut or things like that. Things that I keep separate, that I have a separate little solar unit and a separate little fence for those. And they're usually in that all the time for the ones that I need to keep separate. So having that standalone solar is something that I rely on heavily.
Yeah, it gives you some redundancy too, or some, two systems basically to lean on.
Yep.
Well, thank you for a really well-designed, informative class full of a lot of great nuggets of life experience and lessons learned. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's been great. Really appreciate you. And I will be sending out a recording of this presentation to the folks who are on here, and I will get those resources and worksheets that Jesse mentioned along with her contact, if you're all right with that. And we'll send that out to the participants in case you want to follow up for more information or any of those books that Jesse mentioned. Thanks so much for delivering this class to us. And it's really helpful because we know that we're going to be facing this, soon, all of us at some point.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well, thank
thanks
you
so
guys. I
much,
appreciate it.
Jesse.
See ya.
And there's a lot of thanks in the chat. Everybody's happy about it. So thanks so much. And we'll be in touch soon. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Y'all have a good night.
Okay. Thank you.
Then, whoops, fabulous
Sorry.
presentation.
I'm just trying to turn off that recording. It did say it stopped.